Guns are loud. Over the years, there have been many different methods thought up to quiet the sound of a firearm. The suppressor has been the most successful of these, an attachment that reduces the flash and report of the weapon. But while the suppressor is typically a separate attachment that threads onto the barrel, there are a select few firearms in which the suppressor is a part of the weapon itself, and perhaps the most notorious of these is the AS Val. The AS Val is undoubtedly a Russian weapon, but the idea of the rifle actually originates from an American firearm. In the 1960s, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down over Russia. The pilot was subsequently captured, with his equipment being extensively examined by Soviet engineers. One of the items they found was an American-made suppressed handgun. This discovery was a wake-up call for the Russians, prompting them to begin development of their own suppressed weapons. And because the ongoing conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States was a cold one, there was a need to equip operators who were in places they weren't supposed to be. On these missions, stealth was a priority. Russian special operations units did have suppressed weapons in their inventory, but these were primarily AKMs with PBS-1 suppressors. While they were functional, they had problems. The PBS-1 suppressor utilized an internal rubber washer to provide sufficient back pressure to cycle the weapon while using subsonic ammo. This rubber washer was not very durable and needed to be replaced after a mere 200 rounds. Obviously, this was not very practical and likely contributed to the demand for a dedicated suppressed firearm. Additionally, the subsonic 7.62x39 ammo used with the PBS-1 was not particularly accurate. So, around the early 1980s, both the KGB and GRU requested a new suppressed rifle and a new round to go along with it. The design team started with the new round first. A significant part of the noise from a gunshot is due to the bullet breaking the sound barrier. So, a simple way to reduce the sound from a gunshot is to reduce the speed of the bullet enough so that it does not break the sound barrier. The Russian engineers took the AKM's 7.62x39 cartridge as a starting point. The 7.62x39 round already travels fairly slow compared to other intermediate cartridges. They then widened the neck of the cartridge so that it could fit a 9mm bullet. What resulted was the 9x39mm round, a subsonic round intended for use in suppressed weapons while also performing better ballistically compared to subsonic 7.62x39 ammunition. Unlike most other cartridges, this was a round that was intended to be exclusively subsonic and only meant to be fired out of suppressed weapons. Of course, a new bullet meant that a new firearm had to be designed to fire it. As with many Soviet weapons of the era, they first began with the Kalashnikov platform. However, while the AK was the starting point, what they would ultimately design would be almost completely different from that platform. This firearm would become known as the AS Val. Like the AK, the AS Val operates using a long-stroke gas piston system. When a bullet is fired, some gas is bled off into a gas port that pushes on a piston. This piston is attached to the bolt carrier and bolt, which cycles backwards, extracting the spent casing and loading a new round. However, that's where the similarities with the AK operating system ends. The AS Val does not have a hammer, at least not a conventional one as seen in the AK. Instead, it uses what's best described as a linear hammer. When the trigger is pulled, the linear hammer is released, striking the firing pin and firing the round. Once the bolt is cycled, the linear hammer is pushed back and caught on the trigger, ready to fire again. But perhaps the most unique feature of the AS Val is its built-in suppressor. While most firearm suppressors thread onto the barrel as a separate attachment, the AS Val suppressor is a part of the rifle itself. In fact, the AS Val has two different methods to dampen the sound of the gunshot. When the bullet is fired, it passes a number of ports in the barrel, where gas is vented into the first expansion chamber within the suppressor. This serves to slow down the round. When it passes through the second chamber, expanding gas is captured within the suppressor baffles, further dampening the sound of the gunshot. Compared to modern-day suppressors, these baffles are incredibly rudimentary, but they do function. With the internal mechanisms of the AS Val designed to slow down the round, and the built-in suppressor, coupled with the subsonic 9x39 round, this makes the AS Val a fairly quiet firearm. The AS Val also has some interesting features that further distinguishes itself from the AK platform. Since subsonic 9x39 drops off at closer distances compared to 7.62x39 or 5.45x39, the distance markings on the rear sights are specifically for the 9x39 round. The selector on the right of the AS Val is very similar to an AK, but it only has two settings, safe and semi-auto. To switch the weapon to full auto, there is a second switch by the pistol grip that changes the weapon from semi to full auto. The magazines themselves look somewhat like AK mags, and rock in just like them as well. To easily differentiate them, the AS Val mags have horizontal indentations that AK mags do not. To sum up, the AS Val is a weapon designed solely for the purpose of being as quiet as possible, while being more ballistically capable than the 7.62x39 round within its effective range. And while it hasn't seen widespread use, it has certainly gained a reputation for being a weapon for Russia's elite. The AS Val has never been widely adopted as an infantry weapon because that was never its intended purpose. It was always meant for clandestine units that needed a quiet weapon. The AS Val has been seen primarily in the hands of Spetsnaz units. However, there are a number of other Russian units who have used the weapon to some capacity, but it's not just limited to Russia. The AS Val has been seen in the hands of units of other countries. With that said, it remains a relatively uncommon rifle. Perhaps the area where the AS Val has seen the most combat use is in the current Ukraine conflict. Whether issued to Russian troops or found in the hands of Ukrainian forces, it's notable that in a war that has seen such an incredible variety of small arms, the AS Val remains a consistent presence. Presumably, the weapon is being used in a reconnaissance role rather than as a frontline assault rifle. But obviously, that information is not readily available. On the Ukrainian side, the AS Val has become something of a coveted war trophy. Since AS Vals are primarily carried by Russian special operations, capturing one is theoretically an indicator of neutralizing a Russian elite unit. Some sources say that in the Russian military, specialized weapons such as the AS Val have lower reliability standards compared to widely adopted rifles such as the AK. Allegedly, the AS Val will not function properly when submerged in water, but there is no public scientific testing available to confirm this. But this would be in line with what is known about the mission parameters of the AS Val. That is, a weapon meant for stealthy reconnaissance operations, or other clandestine missions. To keep up with modern times, a new variant of the AS Val, the ASM, was introduced sometime around 2018. This new variant of the AS Val features rails on the dust cover and handguard, allowing a user to mount modern optics, lights, and lasers as needed. Beyond the use case of the weapon, it's easy to see from a logistical standpoint why the AS Val hasn't been adopted in large numbers. The AS Val shares no parts compatibility with the AK, meaning that logistics would need to be set up to bring in replacement parts for the weapon. Additionally, while there are other firearms that use the 9x39 round, there aren't that many, and its subsonic nature limits its usefulness beyond recon operations. Bringing in 9x39 at a large scale for such a specific use case may not be worth it. The AS Val is a special weapon, and though it isn't a rifle that's in the hands of users around the world, it nevertheless has gained quite a favorable reputation. This is in no small part thanks to video games. The real AS Val has seen limited use in combat. but perhaps due to its unique look and unconventional design, it has become a massively popular weapon in video games. Of course, there's the fact that the AS Val is a cool-looking gun, reminiscent of the AK, but different enough that even the untrained eye will notice some of the differences. In particular, the suppressor certainly sets it apart. Just as the real AS Val is a fairly quiet rifle, the in-game depictions of the AS Val are almost silent. And just like its real counterpart, AS Vals in games have their suppressors be a built-in part of the weapon, rather than a separate attachment. So in games where the number of attachments you can put on a weapon is limited, having a built-in suppressor saves a slot for something else. Not to mention, of course, that while unrealistically quiet, the suppressed sound of the AS Val firing in most games is just cool. The real AS Val also has a relatively high rate of fire for a rifle, about 900 rounds a minute. While this isn't very important for real combat, rate of fire is a significant factor for how good a firearm will perform in games. With most video game firefights taking place at relatively close distances, the winner is often decided by who can land more shots on target faster. And a faster rate of fire is a huge benefit in winning these gunfights. The AS Val's 900 round per minute rate of fire means that in most games, it is an incredibly lethal weapon up close. Additionally, while not exactly realistic, many of these games depict the AS Val as having incredibly low recoil. A high rate of fire with little recoil is a recipe for a meta choice. It's perhaps for these reasons that the AS Val has become very popular in games. Even though its number of appearances is surprisingly limited, the AS Val is a firearm that's hard to forget. Whether it's depicted as an accurate DMR, or a CQB terror, or simply a good-looking weapon with a unique silhouette, the AS Val is a favorite in many different games. A good-looking rifle that performs just as well when it comes to games, the AS Val is a force to be reckoned with. Throughout history, there's always been an obsession with elite warriors and the weapons they use. And that's certainly true of modern Russia. To this day, there remains relatively little information about Russian special operations, but there's no doubt that they have a fearsome arsenal. The AS Val was never a widely issued weapon, but it has nevertheless gained a reputation for being a refined weapon for the elite. Those who have had the misfortune of hearing the AS Val fired at them know it means only one thing: Russia's best are coming. But it's more likely that you won't hear anything until it's too late. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to check out my previous video on the AKS-74U. And if you want to stay updated on new videos, be sure to subscribe.